And welcome to Prime Business. My name is Emma Davis. Let's do some stories now. The Bank of Ghana has indicated that it will this year make a decision on the terms of participation in the Gold for Oil program. Government in February last year launched the initiative to allow the state to pay for imported oil products with gold. However, the initiative has been criticized after the country signed up for the International Monetary Program. But Dr. Ernest Addison, Governor of the Bank of Ghana, is commenting on this.
We all sort of appreciate the circumstances under which the Gold for Oil program was introduced. Almost foreign exchange market that was not functioning well, and speculation had taken over the market, and the BDCs were speculating on what exchange rate to use, in their transactions. It didn't help with the pricing of oil at the pump. At the same time, this also happened at the time that crude oil prices were very high. And therefore, the government intervention to try to manage crude oil prices at the pump came through these government-to-government negotiations between the Ghana government and some other suppliers in the Emirates. And then we had already started our Gold for Reserves program, and this idea of exchanging gold directly for oil came up. That's how it all started. So that was one form of intervention, the barter trade. And then there were also cases where we had to sell the gold and pay for the oil using the US dollars. So it helped during the crisis to manage that problem. And we have found that as a very useful program. The issue is, have we reached the point where we think that the markets have settled, our foreign exchange market is behaving well, and therefore Bank of Ghana could probably, focus on its core business of managing inflation? These are the assessments that we are making, and these are the discussions we have had with the fund. We are evaluating, our exposure to the whole program and the risks that it brings to the bank. And then the bank's board would have to evaluate that report. That report is not yet ready. But once that report is ready, we will take a decision on when to exit.
Meanwhile, Executive Director of IAS, Nana Moisi VII, says the Gold for Oil program has not achieved its intended purpose of stabilizing prices of petroleum products. According to him, the program did not make any significant gains, and the IMF program will not redeem the Gold for Oil program.
As at last July, when we did check the importation against the market, and I'm talking about the importation of fuel, reference to the Gold for Oil program, to the entire market volume, we could say that the Gold for Oil program was contributing roughly 17% of the importation of product that we need in the country. This is not significant enough to induce the market and the prices. And so we can't say the Gold for Oil program has achieved any purpose as to relative to fuel price on the Ghanaian markets. What we know is that over the past 8 months, prices of petroleum products on the international markets have been dropping. And so if you manage well your own forex, then of course, we will have some reprieve or some form of cushioning on the Ghanaian front. So we can't say the Gold for Oil program has done much to fuel prices in the country relative to the volume of importation. The Bank of Ghana is still assessing the risk of the program to the Bank of Ghana. Until you have done this, no IMF program will support such an initiative. They want to understand that, do you know your own exposure to this program? Is it that don't you know, or do you really know there is going to be a fiscal burden on the economy in some time to come? And so until that is clear, the IMF program will not support such an initiative.
The central bank, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, is insisting that the Cedi has responded positively to the International Monetary Fund program, which has culminated in $1.2 billion inflows. George Riafe has more on this and other issues highlighted by the governor.
Some have questioned the IMF program's influence on the local currency's fortunes. This was after the Cedi ended last year with about 27% depreciation, has even seen some blips over the past weeks. But Governor, the Bank of Ghana disagrees.
This is not a fixed exchange rate. But if you look at the graph, it appears as if the Cedi has been fixed, right? But that reflects, some of the improved external sector conditions, the improvement in the current account balance, the improvement in the foreign exchange buffers of the central bank, and then the emergence of confidence in the economy, and therefore the currency has remained relatively stable. At least we are not seeing the very high depreciation that you were seeing in 2022. Remember, the currency depreciated by over 50% in 2022. Now this year we are looking at 7%. That's the impact of the flows that have come in.
The Bank of Ghana Governor Dr. Ernest Addison also justified the marginal policy rate cut despite push for a bigger reduction to help stimulate growth.
Inflation is still high. At the same time, we are also watching the impact on the growth side, and therefore we are trying to manage two things, looking at sticking to our core mandate of bringing inflation down, and at the same time being mindful of the need to give a little bit of, incentives to the growth side also by the decision to cut the policy rate by 100 basis points. Now, if you look at the ECF program, it was expected that growth will slow. If you can't have this very tight fiscal consolidation, very tight monetary policy, and not have growth slow down. In fact, we are seeing that growth has performed better than originally projected.
The banking sector remains robust, and they are even in a strong position to recapitalize way before the proposed deadline.
Banks are doing much better than we anticipated. We remember we had given them up to 2026 or so, 3 years to recapitalize, but they are way ahead of the recapitalization plans that they have submitted. Most of them have had their annual general meetings where they are getting their shareholders to sort of raise resources. And therefore the problem really, I think, has been taken care of. The banks that have got investment will see the government also coming in with more resources. So, Sullivan, I think that rest assured that our banks are very strong and resilient, and we don't foresee any major problems with bank capitalization in the country. Kingsley, your question.
The Bank of Ghana Governor Dr. Ernest Addison also indicated that Ghana is doing far better than expected when it comes to the targets set under the IMF program. Therefore, there wouldn't be any need for some extra measures implemented to aid in the quick recovery of the economy.
Ghana Commercial Bank believes its strategy to go digital has reinforced its position as one of Ghana's top-tier banks with a strong market dominance. According to its managing director, Kofi Adomako, its digital approach has not only secured its position as a top-tier bank, but has also solidified its market dominance. He spoke at the bank's 70th anniversary gala and awards.
The special guest of honor for the night, President Akufo-Addo, urged the bank to continue to partner with the government to ensure access to cheap long-term finance for businesses across the country. Managing Director,
I asked the bank to use the occasion of its 70th anniversary celebrations to lead a patriotic cri de coeur for an industry-wide partnership with government to drive down lending rates for our businesses and young entrepreneurs. I invite you Enhance with government to increase significantly access to affordable long-term financing for businesses, especially for our young entrepreneurs. The success of GCB Bank is knitted with the success of our nation, and I have full confidence that the bank will continue to play a pivotal role in shaping a prosperous future for Mother Ghana.
Director of GCB Bank PLC, Kofi Adumako, lauded the bank's resilience over the years.
We're the most resilient bank in the market today. Okay, the debt exchange program, yes, it did have an impact. We made a loss in 2022. We saw the loss. We did make a loss, but we turned around the profit. We took one of the heaviest impairments in the market. But GCB has a strong customer base. Look, this bank is 70-year-old. We have the biggest retail book in this country. Okay? We have the biggest customer base in this country. We are spread all over the country. Okay? We are deep. We're a very deep bank. This bank is a national asset. In 10 years, GCB Bank should look more like a regional bank. So just watch that space.
The gala and awards night saw present and former managing directors, employees, and key stakeholders being awarded by the bank for their immeasurable contribution to the bank's growth and development since its inception 7 decades ago.
Away from the banking sector, the equity market is expected to perform well in 2024 due to the improving economy, low market valuation, and increasing interest in equities. That's a forecast by Data Bank Research. It forecasts a rise in the Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index to gain 20% by the end of the year. Here's more.
The research firm said it expects banking stocks to fare better in 2024 as the financial sector continues recuperating from the aftermath of the domestic debt exchange program. Banks are undergoing another round of recapitalization, and many expect them to become better equipped to absorb shocks and maintain financial stability. This will present a potentially profitable investment opportunity over the medium to long term. Data Bank Research also expects Ghana's telecom market leader, MTN, to continue to do well in 2024 as its favorable market valuation, strong financial performance, and consistent dividend payout continue to draw investor interest. Despite the strong performance among consumer goods counters in 2023, it however foresees more capacity for these stocks to continue to do well in 2024, benefiting from the rebounding of the Ghanaian economy.
The insurance sector has been ranked last in customer service, according to a report by the Institute of Customer Service Professionals. The sector scored 61.5%. Meanwhile, the research conducted by the Institute identified the telecommunication industry as the best-ranked sector in customer service with a score of 88.12%. The Institute disclosed that customer service improved to 73.94% in 2023, which represents a 7.68% increase from 2022. Here are details of the report.
The research spanned around 11 parameters, which included trust, look and feel, competence, professionalism, ease of doing business, among others. The report measured customer satisfaction, its causes and effects, as well as implication for 10 economic sectors.
I think that mostly, if you checked, I think last year they had a lot of regulatory issues. That particular sector also has issues with fraud and claim scams. Okay, so I am anticipating that it's become very difficult for them or some of these insurance institutions to deal with these particular issues. And the minute that happens, the very person whose experience is touched is the customer. So for the insurance sector, I think those are some of the things that made it very difficult for them to come up top or be in the first 5. That being said, their responses were also not as much or as many as it used to be. So last year, they had close to 500 responses. This year, it was about 169. So again, you can see that the number of people who responded on their behalf wasn't really what was expected. And that also accounts for the low scores that they had. Ghana has made or has had an improvement. We're now rated B as opposed to C from last year with a 69.21%. This year, 63 points and above is what we ended up getting. And in as much as some organizations and some sectors also didn't do too well, the general or overall customer experience rate for Ghana has increased. So it's actually a good thing.
The Ghana Customer Service Index is a national indicator of customer evaluations of the quality of goods and services patronized by both Ghanaians and non-Ghanaians living in Ghana. James Ishen's report for Joy Business.
The Africa Business Council is making a strong case for the government of Ghana and other governments across Africa to implement a policy that will reserve 40% of all public procurements to African businesses. The Africa Business Council says the concept, if adopted, will create an African continent full of prosperity. President of the Africa Business Council was speaking in an exclusive interview on Foreign Affairs on the Joy News channel.
Our intra-Africa trade does not exceed like 16% among ourselves, compared, for instance, to Asia, which has exceeded 60%. Europe, it's over 58% among themselves. So what are really the enablers to make us trade among ourselves, and what are we going to trade? So within this context, our founding vision of Africa Business Council is a competitive, borderless, innovative Africa for trade, investment, and industrialization.
I see.
So really the core issue, how to industrialize and add value to trade among ourselves. And this, we have a strategy, we call it the triad of empowerment, which is really based on 3 pillars. The first pillar is the private sector strengthening, including SMEs, women and youth. I need to empower our majority of the African private sector. The small and medium enterprises, the women entrepreneurs, the cross-border traders, all those are, because the private sector is not homogeneous. How we do this? By building capacity, skills development, information, technology to empower our people. The second pillar really is about policy advocacy. We need an enabling environment, and we are happy, thanks to the government of Ghana, thanks to His Excellency President Nana, for really being under his auspices, the Africa Prosperity Dialogue, because what we need is the political will. How we reduce corporate taxes, how we promote incentives for investment from African investment, how we have a special treatment for our African private sector. So one of the things we are working on now, and is already was recommendation of the African Union Private Sector Forum, adopted by the Ministers of Planning and Finance, is to have at least 40% of all government procurement goes to African private sector, including SMEs, women and youth.
Finance will be key in achieving that. I believe, the world is just returning from the World Economic Forum, where, of course, that has come up really strongly on how we should be supporting developing or emerging markets in these very trying and challenging times. Of course, issues about, financing has been a challenge for many African countries. How do we weather the storm and to try as much as possible to raking and mobilize lots of funding to support these agenda that we have?
So first, there should be financial inclusion. This again what we are really promoting, how to have financial inclusion and facilitate financial services, access to credit, access to finance, to bankable projects. To have a bankable projects, we need to really support how it's going to be bankable, how to support the projects, or whether it's a government, it's a private sector. But above this, our financial institutions on the continent have to be empowered themselves.
The Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area says we're making progress in his estimation when it comes to this trading framework. Do you share the same assertion that indeed we are making progress with the framework?
Yes, we have already leaped ahead several phases. So there is now the protocol for women youth, there is protocol for digital trade. There is the movement is going on. We need to push it further, and we need the political will, as I said, to accelerate the process. But again, who is going to implement it? The private sector. So we need to have the private sector really empowered and have a lead and make sure that we are going parallel together to realize the ACFTA.
The African Development Bank says it is worried that although we're making strides in raising revenue and building prosperity on the African continent, there seems to be a challenge. And the challenge is that there is still illicit flow of finance out of the African continent. How worried is the African Business Council about this development as well?
We have a sector as a cluster for financial services and financial inclusion that really works on this sector to see how the financial sector is really organized and how we have access to finance, because many of the things happen that at least now when you want payment, the payment around the continent is not easy. So the Afri-Exim has put this payment system so that we are able to promote, to trade among ourselves with our local currencies, because this again is very important. So these initiatives should be really used by the private sector, supported by the governments and the political leaders, and making it awareness for all the African people.
Energy analyst with the Institute of Energy Securities, Adam Yakubu, has revealed that Africa's huge carbon potential provides an enormous opportunity to raise finance in the increasing carbon credit markets globally. Currently, the continent is home to some of the planet's most important natural carbon repositories, including forests, grasslands, peatlands, and mangroves. There's more.
Africa is positioning itself to do carbon credits, such that we trade off so that there's a net off with those which countries have exhausted their carbon footprints. Africa still has potential. If you look at the number of sustainability projects we can do, can raise and use that as financing or raise that as capital or credit to be exchanged or netted off with countries that have exhausted their financing. I think that we can do very well, especially in Ghana. We have the potential. We can still do a number of the housing projects. We can do the tree projects, and we have a national tree project. If we can get that properly planned and properly accounted for, then at the end of the day, you can net it off, and it comes in as credit. And that's something that will be a plus to our revenue numbers. Yeah.
That'll be all for tonight. My name is Emma Davis. For more business news, do log on to myjoyonline.com. Up next is Prime Sports, but here is some international business.